So, for the past couple of weeks, I've been watching this show from like 2004. It's called House. I'm sure you've never heard of it. I started watching this show because I watched the first season like a few years ago and I couldn't remember anything about it. All I knew is that it was like good, and I was like, well, I guess I gotta watch it again. And then I started watching it and I realized I really want to talk about it. So this is sort of like my supernatural videos. It's a little different because I'm not as invested in House. I just wanted to kind of analyze it and mainly just talk about it. This video is just going to be covering the first season, so spoilers ahead if you haven't seen the first season. So I want to talk about the good things first, I guess. The most important part of anything you see is the first thing, right? The pilot. It's probably one of the most important things about a show. It's the thing that decides if the show will exist or not. In this pilot, I like it. It's interesting. It's definitely old, but not bad. Every episode is 45 minutes, and I'm sure that was great for weekly air dates back then, but in the era now that we're in where we can watch an entire season all at once, 22 episodes at 45 minutes an episode is it's so much. It's so much to it's a lot to watch. The pilot is pretty solid. It's really interesting. It introduces our 6 main characters, depending on whether you cut a couple. Obviously, the pilot introduces House, Dr. Cuddy, Dr. Chase, Dr. Cameron, Foreman, and my personal favorite, Dr. Wilson. It also introduces House's addiction, his averse nature to work, and his little quirks, like how he likes watching soap operas, he avoids patients, he likes playing piano, he's kind of the bad boy of the hospital, but he's super important, and his hatred of clinic duty. It also sets up the mystery around his leg, his attitude, and that he likes puzzles. The first case that's introduced to him, that the first case that we see, because the opening of the episode starts with her collapsing, is given to him by his best friend, Wilson. House has to be persuaded into taking the case. He doesn't just like, ooh, case. He has to like hear about it and figure out if it's interesting, and then he'll take it. It's kind of a little bit anticlimactic with the actual plot of the episode, because all these like random things happen, and then oh my god, it's a tapeworm, and then it's like, oh no, let's fix it, and then it's over. Okay, the good things about season 1. Obviously, I'm going to mention the cinematography. It's very nice, but I will say it's a little safe. I'm talking about the sets and the actual lighting and the camera moves of every episode, but the cinematography, including the use of CGI and macro lenses, and the pilot actually has a shot of a macro lens. It's a little gross, but we kind of like zoom in to the patient's nose to get to her brain, and then it's a CGI of what's going on in her brain, which is interesting. The cinematography also leads to like the editing and the music, and it's all very nice. It's all very like cut well together. It flows. I don't know who like made this show the way it is, but it looks pretty nice. The actual like look is a little bland because it's doctors in a hospital, but I mean, it wouldn't be like super dramatic all the time, so like I get it, but it's lacking. Each character is really interesting in their own right. They all bring something to the table. and the way they're acted is really interesting too. Like, Cameron has this kind of like sincerity to her. Chase is kind of arrogant and rude, but he's pretty, so he's nice to look at. Foreman is really, he's kind of like the voice of reason between House's complete disinterest in people and Cameron's obsessiveness about taking care of people and things. And Chase is just kind of like on the outside. But Foreman, he's really like the spine of the group. I was gonna say the heart, but he's like the spine. He's very controlled. The characters evolve, whether slightly or drastically, but it's interesting to see how they change from the first episode to the last episode. House is probably the most drastic and the most stagnant, which is a weird combination, but he starts the season really like misanthropic and pessimistic, and he ends the season a little bit more hopeful but also sad. Like, he starts the season with like almost no emotion, just hating everything, and then he ends still kind of the same way, but he's like feeling more emotion, I guess. He's meant to be a jerk, he's meant to be this way, and by the end it's like, wow, that's a huge change, but it's still like he doesn't change very much. It's just within his character he's different. I hope that makes sense. Probably not. Interestingly, a doctor show about doctors has an overarching plot for the whole season and a villain, but it still maintains the Monster of the Week organization of each episode. So each episode is about a specific case, and we are introduced to a new character that we learn about and care about, and then that character is gone and we never see them ever again. And then the next episode starts, and it's the same thing over and over again. But within that one case, there's also the added elements of House doing clinic duty, House being at his house, not very often outside the hospital, just more like outside of the hospital room. There's like, they eat lunch together, or they take walks together, or House and Wilson talk in his office, something like that. So it's not always in the hospital room and there's also like a lab, so the Chase and Cameron and Foreman also talk in the lab together. So it's not just all stuck in one room, but it is stuck in one building. So I think season 1 is, because it has the Monster of the Week vibe, the overarching plot is kind of not there for most of the season. It's like, for the first half, it's mostly like dropped in little hints. We hear about Wilson meeting with Stacy, who we don't know who it is, but based on House's reaction, it's probably his ex-girlfriend. We find out that House hasn't had a girlfriend in like 5 years because he was horribly distraught from his last relationship. When I was watching, I didn't really connect that the last relationship and Stacy were the same thing, but they don't really explain it until the end of the season anyway, so whatever. And the other part of the overarching plot comes in the form of Edward Vogler, who is the villain, at least as far as I can tell. He comes into the hospital, buys his way onto the board. Then from there, he immediately dislikes House, criticizes him all the time, and tells him he can't do things. Basically tries to get rid of House. So that's kind of the main conflict of the season, is House is trying to keep his job, even though it seems like he doesn't really want to keep it, and Vogler is adamantly pushing House out. I think the best thing about this season is that it doesn't feel long, drawn out, or tired, because it's all new. It's all exciting. We get to meet new patients. We learn a little bit about the doctors. All those little things, they add up, and each case for each patient is interesting. It's not repetitive. It's all different. But we have our landmarks and our people that we see every time, like Wilson and Cuddy and the main four. So basically, there's lots of variety, and it's dramatic and funny, which surprised me, and smart. There's a lot of information to absorb, and you kind of gotta be smart to, like, not really understand the show, but to, like, understand everything that's in the show, because these four doctors are diagnosticians, so they know a lot of things about human bodies. And if you're like me and you know nothing about the human body, it's really like, what is a sarcoma? Which I know is cancer. Figured that out after 22 episodes. Finally got it. The character relationships and dynamics are really what keep me coming back. I like the relationship between Chase Foreman and Cameron. It's sort of a mixture of friendship, co-workers, romantic tension, but they have this close relationship. House is kind of their boss, a little bit like a father figure, a lot like a mentor. Sort of a friend, but not quite, because he's their boss. Cuddy is definitely like a boss but friend figure, and then Wilson is totally just a friend. He's an adorable cinnamon roll, and he deserves the world. And I'm being extremely biased. I apologize. The last two episodes are really nice. The second to last episode is called 3 Stories, and it's probably my favorite episode of the season, just because it's, like, completely different from any other episode. It's funny, it's got fourth wall breaks, it's got cool editing, it's got a lot of insight into House's character and his relationship with Stacy, and I like it. I like it a lot. And the season ends with you wanting a lot more. But honestly, most of the plot lines are wrapped up, aside from sort of the thing with Stacy, but if there was just the one season and it ended after that, it would be a nice ending point. But, you know, there's still questions, like, oh, what's gonna happen now that she's back? But the season really, like, finishes everything. They defeated Vogler, at least in a villain aspect. I think season 1 is pretty good. I like it. I do have complaints, though. So, I'm going to talk about my complaints now. First, the medical jargon is killing me. I am not a doctor, okay? I don't understand a lot of the medical terms that they use in this show. It's like they wanted it to be as realistic as possible, which I totally understand. I love it. But that leads to the audience not understanding things. Isn't the point of a show like escapism? Entertainment? But I get it. You want the show to be accurate. You want it to sound real. I understand. But the medical jargon, and they never explain anything. Another complaint. The episodes are so long. They're 44 minutes, 45 minutes on average. And there's 22 episodes in this season, which would be fine if it was just the one season. But there are 8 seasons, and only one of them has 16 episodes because of the writer's strike of 2008. That's the only reason. And season 2 has 24 episodes, and then it's 22 or 23, and then it's 16, and then it's 24, and then it's 22, and then it's too many episodes. It's a lot. I need, like, just cool it, just like 30 minutes, 25, just like ease it back, you know? Or just make like 10 episodes that are like an hour. That would be great. Again, with the medical jargon, if I hear sarcoidosis or meningitis again, I will shoot someone. They say those 2 words in every single episode. Every time House says differential diagnosis, it's like, oh, they're gonna say meningitis or cancer or hepatitis again. Oh my god. And it's like, just pick something else. Please, pick something else. My next complaint is that every episode is about a case. And with that case comes a patient. and we have to learn everything about that patient. We have to learn their characterizations. We get to learn about their problems, their home life, their condition. Because we characterize the patients so heavily, we have no room for the doctors. And the doctors are the main characters of our show. So if we're not learning about the main characters of our show, it kind of becomes annoying to watch the show, because it's like, I know nothing about these people. Why am I watching this? Learning about new patients every single episode is kind of similar to people using plastic once and then throwing it away. It's like, it feels like it doesn't matter, and then suddenly you have a giant trash island in the ocean, and the turtles are dying, and all of the animals are suffocating, and it doesn't seem like a problem, and then suddenly it builds up, and it is. And I stop watching your show because I can't stand it. So we never have an episode that's just about the doctors, and they're our main characters. I want to learn about my main characters. Like, literally the only doctor that we know a lot about is House, and even then, we know how he injured his leg. We know that he plays piano. We know that he likes Wilson as a friend. We know that he likes his employees, and he secretly cares about people. But that's about it. He likes puzzles. He's mean. Yeah. I don't know. We get, like, small character interactions, which is where we learn most of these things, but it's all, like, non-verbal. It's all, like, we see him caring, but he's manipulative about it. Like, he tells Cameron, I love you, and it makes her, like, go like this, and he takes a swab of her saliva so that he can test her for HIV, which is a whole thing. She might or might not have HIV, and she doesn't want to take the test, and then so he forces a test upon her by manipulating her and saying, I love you, which makes her open her mouth, and then he gets the sample, and it's a whole thing. Another problem that I have are the subtle discriminations. And this is because the show aired in 2004, and it's old, and not everything is going to be politically correct, because the standards were different back then. I did notice Foreman gets discriminated against a lot because he's black. House is always, like, teasing him about it, making jokes about it, all this stuff, and it feels racist, and it's rough, and it's difficult because he's a subordinate, and then House is also his boss, and there's also that weird power dynamic, and then it's a whole thing that's not really my place to talk about because I don't understand that experience, but to me, I noticed that Foreman always feels like he's taking, like, a back seat to the white characters. There are black patients sometimes, and Foreman kind of bonds with them, but I feel like it's, at least from the few episodes that there are black patients, they bond because they're black, and that's kind of it. Like, it's not my experience, so I don't really know what to say about it. It's just, like, it feels weird that Foreman is put in that position only because he's black. Vogler, Edward Vogler, who is the main antagonist for season 1, he's also black. And from the first moment we see him, he's a big, imposing threat. And he's black. And it feels wrong. But it's not my experience, it's not my place to say, but it feels like bad, associating villains with blackness, and it's hard to, like, I don't know exactly what I'm saying. The point is, he's a villain, and I feel like it's only because he's this big, imposing black man, and it's tough because our main character is white, and they hate each other, so there's that, like, constant hate and discrimination, and it's just, I don't know. I can't, like, I don't have the right experience to say my interpretation of it. It's just, it feels weird. There's also an episode called Maternity where a bunch of babies are getting sick in the hospital, and it's an epidemic. Two of the parents of one of these babies are both women, which is great, awesome. No one even makes a joke about them being a couple. Honestly, it's not even explicitly stated. It's just they exist, they're there, they're wives, and that's it. It's such good representation because no one brings attention to it. No one specifically says, these two are lesbians. Look, lesbians are in our show. Oh my god, everyone throw us a party. No, they're just people existing in the world. It's very realistic because that's how most of the LGBT community is existing. They just live in the world. They're just around. The thing that kills me, though, is that their baby dies because of a direct decision that House made, and the baby that survives is the baby of a straight couple. Literally, it's just a random decision, but from the outside perspective, the writing room, it feels like purposeful, like attacking LGBT people because they're LGBT and their baby dies, and then they're out of the episode, and it's like, oh, God. You know, it's not, like, on purpose, but it feels on purpose, and it's, when you watch it, you're like, God, But, like, if they were a straight couple, it would be fine. It's just, I mean, also kind of sad, because you're killing a baby, but, you know, I don't know. I just noticed it, and I was like, oh, you gotta kill that one. Okay, great. Also, fun fact, the lesbian couple in the episode Maternity was Hispanic and Asian. So, we got multiracial lesbians. Yay! Woo! So we also got our people of color in there. Okay, next thing, which feels lesser. I don't know why I put it last. But Cameron is a very attractive woman. And it's explicitly stated that House hired her because she's attractive. All of her coworkers are men, except for Dr. Cuddy. But they don't really, like, interact. The point is, she gets discriminated against a lot because she's pretty and a woman. Which, yikes. Don't do that. But, yeah. Not much to say about that one. I just honestly just wanted to mention it because, like, House is really not anti-woman. It's just, like, misogyny is kind of in there. You know? I don't really know what to say about it. It's just in there. I think as a whole, the writing's very clever. It's pretty funny. It's a little dated, but, I mean, at the time, it was pretty good. The people talk like real people for the most part because, I mean, I'm not around doctors all the time, so I don't know how doctors talk. The only problem is a lot of characters, they all talk the same, which isn't really a problem. It's just like, it's like you get a patient who comes in and they talk exactly like how Cameron talks. And it's like, they've never met before. They're not, like, friends. They don't hang out all the time. Like, it makes sense that all the doctors would talk the same, but it doesn't make sense that, like, everyone talks the same. Like, I don't know if that makes sense. Think about, like, a movie where you have, like, a detective and a preschool teacher. They wouldn't talk the same. The detective might be more, like, direct and mysterious or something, and the kindergarten teacher would be very, like, soothing or kind, you know. So, like, the way that they talk, based on their personalities and everything, kind of is different. So there's definitely, like, differences. It's just, it's one of the problems that comes with one writer writing everything. It's and especially, like, a style of a show. It's everything's put through one filter, and things kind of look the same after a while. But, I mean, they're able to, like, mix it up that you don't really notice it until you've seen the seasons, like, 5 times. But I've only seen season 1, so for season 1, it seems pretty good. Not too samey, but, you know, it's not all different either. House and Wilson's dynamic is probably my favorite. They're kind of like middle school boys, but like super smart also, because they're like doctors, but then they're like just best friends. They like hanging out. And then House, he's a classic rude genius. Think Sherlock Holmes. Either version. Both versions. They're mean, but they're super smart, so they think whatever I say I can get away with because I'm super smart and I'm always right. And that's one of House's things. He's always right. You know, saying it and actually being right, two different things, but, you know, semantics, whatever. House's drug addiction plot is very interesting. We get mentions towards the beginning of the season, and then towards the end we actually get like a exploration of it. But it's very short. It only lasts like one episode. Like I mentioned before, nothing gets explained. And I sort of like this because within the story, all the characters are doctors and they understand what those diseases are, so they don't need someone to explain to them what it is. So there's no annoying exposition. There's no like, oh my god, this is a doctor. They know what cancer is. You know, like there's none of that. The only bad thing about it is that the audience doesn't understand. I don't know what sarcoidosis is. I don't know what an aneurysm is. Like, I mean, you like, okay, side note, I do know what an aneurysm is. I just don't know, like, what it physically is, like, what it looks like. I don't know how it presents in your brain. Like, when you say aneurysm, I'm like, oh, that's bad. But, like, I don't know what it is, you know, like, what is an aneurysm? Is it, like, a blood clot? Is it, like, a tear in your brain? Like, what is it? And they never explain it. So, it's kind of annoying, but, like, I get it. But at the same time, I'm like, can you explain some stuff? But, like, I also like that they don't explain everything. So there's never any exposition. I mean, never say never. Just real quick, I'm editing this. I wanted to explain. Inside me, there are two wolves. One of the wolves is a writer, and one of the wolves is an audience member. And the writer thinks that exposition is bad and should be avoided unless absolutely necessary. The audience member thinks that exposition is helpful so that I understand what is going on in the story and what the stakes are and why I'm watching the story. Why is it important? And as a writer, if you can tell the audience why something is important without actually telling them, that's really good. But as an audience member, if you try to do that and I still don't understand, that's kind of a problem, and that's why exposition is needed sometimes. When it gets too complicated and there's too much, then it's bad. But if it helps the audience understand what's going on in your story, then leave it in. Final thoughts. I've only seen season 1, and so far I like the show. I want to keep watching it. I hope to see more evolution of the characters. I like how they are in season 1. I wish there was a little bit more, but with such short episodes, which is funny to say because I just complained about how long the episodes are. They're short in the way that episodes nowadays are like an hour, and there's less of them. So everything's a lot, like the writing's a lot tighter. In House, the writing's kind of loose and flowy, and things kind of match up, and then they're done, you know? It's kind of like a loose loom braid or something. It's like, it all works, but it's not, like, tight and efficient and exact. Which shows nowadays are pretty tight and efficient and exact. So, I guess I just grew up with that standard of television, so watching older shows is just like, oh my god, it's taking forever. Can we, like, get to the point? I like season 1. It's kind of slow, based on my bias towards modern TV. I like the case-by-case episodes, the Monster of the Week kind of organization, but I do hope for more variety in the future. Like, I love 3 Stories so much because it's so different from any other episode in the season. I want to hope that there will be more stakes in the future. Like season 1 had really interesting stakes, like House almost lost his job, Wilson almost lost his job, Cuddy almost lost her job, and Cameron and Chase and Foreman were almost fired, and it's this whole thing, and it's like, oh my gosh. So like, I like the stakes, and I kind of hope for more of that in future seasons, and less repetition, because this is the one thing that I have about doctor shows. Like, I haven't watched Grey's Anatomy, I haven't watched Scrubs, I haven't watched what's that other one? There's another one, but I can't remember. I just don't like doctor shows because they're so repetitive. It's hard for me to keep watching because it's like, oh my god, you're doing the same thing over and over again. Stop. But, they don't. So I really want to stick with House. It's just the repetition kind of kills me. Last thing. I like the show so far, but I think it could do a lot more with all the time that it has. It's difficult to see what will happen just because, I don't know. And also the show's old, so, like, maybe nothing will change. Maybe it'll just be one of those shows that gets worse as it goes on and then ends. Everyone's like, oh, that show, I don't even remember it. Or I hate that show because of the ending. Like, so many shows nowadays that have bad endings that have ruined the show forever. You know exactly what I'm talking about, don't you? You know. Those are my thoughts on House. Alright, so thanks for watching this video. Sorry it was so long.